Welcome to the Born Primitive Outdoor Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Snyder. I'm probably going to quit saying that shit because you guys know who I am and it's getting old. But as most of you know, gotten into the fly fishing thing pretty seriously. Bear season hasn't started. And I talked to Jerry, my partner in crime, and he does all the editing for the podcast. He's like, let's just do one fly fishing podcast a month or so. And as I've gotten into this, one of the names that's popped up more than any has been a huge help on YouTube and just learning for me is Kelly Galloup, and that is who I have on the podcast today. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, good morning.
So
good to be here.
I, following along with you for a little bit, you're a bit of a legend in the fly fishing world. You've designed a ton of different, streamers. You're really well known for streamers, but many other things. And you talk a lot of shit as well, which I prefer. Small world before we get going. Crazy enough, I've literally talked to Kelly for about 5 minutes before we got on this podcast. But as I've gotten into this, everybody knows Scotty Campbell, like my brother, worked together on the Owl Dad guiding stuff. And Scotty, like 3 weeks ago, is like, hey, man, if you're ever up near Ennis, go into this place called the Slide In. My dad was friends with that guy, and his place was right across the street. And I'm like, Kelly Galloup Slide In? And Scotty's like, yeah, you know him? And I'm like, well, no, but I copy the shit out of everything he does. And so it's small world. But you've been doing this a long time. How long have you been, basically like the fishing, fly fishing? I mean, 40, 50 years, it seems like?
Oh, yeah, easy. I started tying when I was 5, so that was 61 years ago. I started guiding when I was real young, not heavily. I mean, I say that I started when I was 15, so I took one kid once on a dual trip. I couldn't even drive. But I guided a kid who was 13. I was 15. And then the next year, his dad hired me to do it again. And then every year I did a few more, but pretty much, I've been in it most of my life. I mean, the fly tying in particular, the fishing. We didn't, in the old days, I say old days, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 60s and 70s mostly, kids didn't start fly fishing. That's something kind of new with the luxury travel, and just, there were a few people that did, but very few people. You dug worms and did what you're supposed to. You learned how to fish, and so when you didn't get a new rifle to go hunt deer either. You learn how to stalk rabbits and other shit and do things. And back then, but really, as a whole, I fly fished, I would say from my early teens on. I was able to do it, but just really didn't like it. I said in a lot of podcast interview things that I love gear fishing. That's why I put so much emphasis on streamers, because I really like the reactionary stuff. But I've said it forever that if I could have designed, if I'd have met Larry Dahlberg, who I consider probably the best ever, if I could have done what he did with like designing lures, I'm not sure I'd be here. I really loved the idea of building my own lure in the fly world, and that's why I started tying when I was 5 years old. My dad had a great idea that he got me started tying bluegill flies, and he would tell me, the guy that was really instrumental in teaching me to fish, named Skip Wetzel, and he would tell me, which this is how brainwashed stupid I was, every time I would tie a fly, he'd say, that's better than Skip's. Well, Skip didn't tie flies, but I didn't know that. But I took it to heart. So I tied for my dad forever. But, the whole guide thing, by the time I was in my, out of high school, then I was pretty much, going full on. I had a little stint there about 10 years when my bodybuilding career thing took a lot of that. I didn't do as much guiding, but once I was out of all that, towards the end of it, I was pretty much full on, 200 plus days a year for, decades. And so, just like everybody, just kind of, it starts one way and it ends up, it's all you. So I've been in a long time.
Yeah, it seems. And I did a quick podcast about this. Just me kind of the parallels of both, bow hunting and fly fishing are pretty crazy. And when I didn't get as much out as I wanted, kind of covering that, but meaning. And some of the, I haven't listened to everything obviously you've done, but like some of the deal, like, where you've got the Euro nymphers and then they get made fun of by this and that. And, that's like compound, talk shit about trad guys say you suck if you shoot a compound. Yeah. And, and then obviously technology, right? Like technology's advanced both bow hunting and fishing, quite a ways. And then you have like the gear side of it of, I listened. One of the funniest podcasts was me listening to you talk about $1,000 rods. 'Cause you get the same thing with archery, and I'm a gear guy, right? So I like gear, but in the end, if you suck and you got picked last at Foursquare, you're gonna suck no matter what you got in your hand, whether bow, rod, whatever. But if you're a good hunter, good fisherman, you're probably gonna be okay no matter what you do, and that definitely parallels. And then the shit talking, that parallels as well. And then guys copying, like when I was researching this, knowing how long you had done it, there was probably 20 other pages repeating verbatim shit you had said over the last 20 years, regurgitating as it was theirs. Which I'm sure you know that. So a lot of parallels, and the same with when you're on the river, same with hunting, right? I mean, the same, learning, becoming. Yeah, I think you and I have a lot of the same parallel. Becoming a master at what you do is more than just going out, right? Like you talked a lot about practicing, right? And I'm psychotic at a level where you would laugh because like when I got into this, the nymphing thing and figured out streamer leaders, like I practice knots, practice tying, go practice casting. Like I'm bad in a good way about, I'm not good at sucking at anything and, practicing. So like, very few people practice fly casting from what I've seen. Yeah. And archery's the same way. Everybody will go out and shoot on flat ground, but they'll never practice like the actual applied angled shots, and it seems like fly fishing is the same way.
Yeah, it's they're all. I agree with you 100%. It's I just finished something for IFFF on fly tying, and I wrote in there: people fishing and hunting do not practice their craft. And fishing, they never do, and they only fishermen only fish, and fly tyers only tie flies. They don't practice the thing that's messing with them, right? I had a kid, Gunnar Bramer, who's become very famous. And when he started with me, he wasn't very good. He was very young, very smart. And he sucked at hair. And he was kind of an annoyance to me because he was just like trying to suck everything out of my body I've ever known. And he's really good, right? This kid just absorbs shit out of you. And I said, well, you suck at it, Bramer. Get a primo strip and go tie the whole thing. Just quit doing the flies. Just tie with the fucking hair. Just get it done. And he came back the next week. He stayed up all night and he burned like 3 things of hair. And he came back and his kid was unbelievable. But he just kept getting better. But it's the same in everything. We don't go out and fish. I ask people all the time to go fish without a fly. It's, in particular, streamer fishing. If you can't do multiple retrieves, you can't do you're just a one-trick pony. Like if all you've got is sitting in a freaking 25-foot man-made deer blind, well, you're not going to be a real good stalker, still hunter.
Yeah.
And so it's like go practice. Go to some place where you don't have the ability to catch a fish, because once a person starts thinking there's a fish in front of them, their brain just shuts down. It's like Ice Age. They revert back to the same shit they always did. I had part of my, after the bodybuilding, and kind of during too, I did a lot of fighting, and I had Joe Bird, the Olympic. I started out boxing and then kickboxing, and we're doing all that stuff. And we'd all have these people. I had Joe Bird into the gym. He was the Olympic boxing coach. His son, Chris, silver medals at the Olympics. And they had a rule in their gym, and he said, and it reverts to this. He said, I said, if you got in a street fight, you're out of the club. That was Joe's. And I asked him once, he was there, and I says, what's with that rule, you know? And he says, it's simple. He said, if you street fighter make a good fighter look bad, he says, when you get in a street fight, you'll forget everything you've been taught, and you'll revert back to what you did when you were 6 years old. And essentially, it's the same with fishermen. If they get in a tense situation, you can watch the wheels fall off the wagon because they don't practice, you know. And so in archery, it might make taking a bad shot or not, you know, whatever it is, it's always the same. And practice is, you know, and in particular, there was another thing he said to me that I'm not sure it was Joe. It was another high level fighter guy. And he said that everything you teach a student before they're 20, like if you start fighting or fishing or hunting before you're 20, and when in our business, a lot of people started after that, right? And he said that, and it really struck home to me, and I've used it a lot in seminars and stuff, but everything you teach somebody before they're 20 is rote. They'll never have to relearn it. If you learn to ski, fish, hunt, whatever it is, you don't have to be retaught. But if you get everything you teach somebody after 20, they have to think about it for a second. And so it becomes more imperative if you learned at a later age, say, you know, 25, 30, when you actually started, you need to practice a lot because your brain, it's not rote. It will not stick like it will to you teach a, 12-year-old how to do a backflip off the bump. He'll be doing them the rest of his life, you know. If you teach somebody who's 25, they got to think about it for a second. And so that's just the way it works. I mean, practice, I still practice knots. I just sit there, I'll be watching TV and burn knots. I'll take, just sit and do it. And I've been doing knots since I was 3 years old. Yeah. So, I mean, that was one of the ways my dad kept me entertained was when we were fishing bluegills. He'd say, tie a knot like on a hook. So I try to tie a knot, right? Yeah. So I completely agree with you that it's practice. It's got to be. I've often said to people guiding them, I guided for so long that many of my customers, they were older than me, usually not a lot, usually 10, 20 years. But so they start getting up in their late 40s, mid to late 40s. And I would look at most of them were guys that fish. The average angler fishes 15 days or less a year, just as a statistic. And so, and I would get these guys and they would fish 2 or 3 times a year, 2 or 3 days a year with me. And I remember saying to him, and you get to be really good friends, as you know, when you're guiding somebody, you're sitting there with them and you're a marriage counselor and a drug addiction counselor and a whatever else counselor. And
same with hunting guiding, same thing. Yep.
Yeah, it's like good. And I would say, you do realize you're getting worse, not better, right? Well, fuck you. I go, well, just saying. When's the last time you practiced casting? Last time I was with you. Got it. I had
a guy years ago, his name was Bill Pellegrino. This is when I was shooting tournament archery and, asking him what it takes to win. And he said, okay, if I said, drop this quarter 3 feet above this coffee cup and I need you to do it 100 times in a row. After 10, 15 times, you're going to start fucking off and you're probably going to miss it. He said, but if I said, I'll give you $1 million if you drop it in 100 times in a row, that concentration is a concentration you need to be at the level to compete at the highest level. You have to have that. And that goes for everything, the art, from building arrows to stalking to, whatever. In fly fishing's the same way. And it seems like you preach that a lot. And the one thing, that as I'm learning this, which is really, because my brain has to be constantly challenged, I guess you could say, right? Is, I picked up streamers the other day for the first time, and I've luckily fished pike and muskie a lot. So as far as retrieving, I think you say pull the rope, like, thank God I have different retrieves, but totally different than nymph fishing. And when I say that, meaning the pockets of water I'm hitting, how I'm fishing them, what I'm doing. And obviously I'm learning with this, but like, reading a river, like, luckily I learned this a long time ago, but one of the best ways to learn to read a river, if you just aren't good at picking it up, is you could walk up the damn thing. And when you're not struggling to walk, it's probably where a fish lives. If you get in and you're like, oh, fuck, I might drown. Fish is probably not living there, right? And so as you're crossing a river trying to pick your path, that path you pick to not drown, to find easier, whatever, like that is part of it too, like becoming a master at all of it. And so it's been interesting listening to some of the different things you say, but like when you've done seminars, thousands of them, I'm sure hundreds, podcasts, you teach classes, what would you say the number one, like, I'd say one, you're going to have more than one. What are the top 3 things where you think, man, I'm going to smack the shit out of you. This is so easy and you're not doing it. like what? Because, you were talking about before 12 or before 20 or whatever. Blunt force trauma and repetition. Those are the 2 things. And I can't hit you. So, because I mean, truly, if you got hit in the back of the head a lot when you were a kid, you're going to remember what you did wrong, whether it's walking quiet. And I've said that guiding, like, get back and tell my buddies, like, that motherfucker never got hit in the back of the head as a kid. He is loud. Yeah. Loud. What would you say the 3 things, like, out of the gate, fly fishermen, fly fisher women, fly fisher people, whatever I'm technically supposed to say now, what are the downfalls? What are the 3 things that are the worst things that they do that are easily fixable?
I don't know about easily, but the thing that people do, beginners, and that's, beginner could be 10-year, 20-year person, they can't read water. And so reading water is an art form in and of itself. And so they are unable to read the water. So the number 2 thing is they put the fly where the fish aren't. And so because they can't read water, and and I've talked about doing whole seminars on this, but it's so hard to have visually without putting a person there, but they don't read water well. So they put their fly in places that the fish are not, or they put it there and their fly gets, we started talking about dry flies, the flies immediately. I live on the Madison, which is fast. Well, put your dry fly in the wrong spot on foot and you will drown it instantly, right? And so reading water and understanding it's no different than hunting. Where do you go to hunt? Well, you go where the animals are or where they're going to be, correct? I mean, it doesn't help you to be, if you go sit on the same edge of the same field every night, you've never seen something there, well, maybe they're not there. And it's the same thing with fly fishermen. Put a lot of emphasis on their fly. And, I've spent I sold my first fly professionally at 13 years old. And they were steelhead flies for the Great Lakes. And I've spent most of my life designing flies. And I've told a lot of people the fly doesn't mean shit. If you can put the best fly in the world, the best jerk bait in the world, the best night crawler ever raised, doesn't catch fish if there's no fish there. And so the first thing is they don't read water. Second, they put too much emphasis on the fly being the savior. Like mine, $6,000, $7,000 bow. Great. You can't shoot anyway. So what the hell's the difference? And so, and the third thing I would say was regardless of what it is, it's like, so you've got the right fly, you kind of figured out the water, but you don't have a drift or a retreat. So first it starts with figuring out where the fish are. Second would be figuring out what it is that they're eating that gives you an opportunity. And third would be, once the fly is in the water, making it do what would it not put the fish off on one half or stimulate the fish on the other. So sometimes it's if you're doing a dead drift, you don't want anything to, you want it to be dead drift, slow drift, or natural drift, or maybe tiny twitch if that's your intent. Or on a streamer, you have to have the ability to manipulate the fly. As I've said in all of my seminars, and you're right, I've done thousands all over the world, and I show a quadrant picture of 4 different subsurface things: crayfish, baitfish, different styles of fish. A sculpin doesn't swim like a darting whitefish, and nothing swims like a crayfish but a crayfish. They don't even really swim, right? And so if you don't have the ability to, in the bow hunting world, you have the ability to camouflage yourself, and if your camouflage is just the opposite, I guess, in a sense, is that if I'm running a bait fish and I dead drift it like a crayfish or something, it's not working. And so you identify where the fish should be, give them what they should be eating. That's what the whole art of fly fishing is imitating something that should be there, and then make it act like it should in nature. And that's why we were talking before we got live about pulling the rope. That's a very rudimentary, and it catches a lot of fish, with this whole trophy hunting thing for trout, you're talking about just like you are with hunting whitetails or anything else, or big muley, whatever it is you hunt, you can, you're really breaking things down to fractions now. I've got a good buddy I'll introduce you to sometime who's another hunting freak like you. And he's, he gets a good animal every year, whatever it is he's hunting. He's a guide, right? But they're not always giant, but he gets a good bull, good whatever. And so in the trophy world, you got to break it down, because I'm usually talking about trophy hunting. And I tell people, you got that, you sent me a picture of that fish. That was a great fish yesterday. And, you got to, when you start breaking it down and you're talking about the difference between getting a really good fish on purpose, there's a big difference between on purpose and flat dumbass luck, right? And because everybody can do that. And if you can replicate, that's the difference between your hunting abilities and Joey Lunch Bucket, is that you can replicate your shit. And that's what I preach in this stuff. And so I say, we were talking about fishing the Wind River up in Crowheart, and Darren and I and Randall Kaufman and McCullough, I don't remember who all was there. We were doing a 2-boat float, and I had just come out with the articulated flies. Were just starting out, right? This is a long time ago. In my first book, there are no articulated flies, but I threw an articulated TNA bunker over the edge of the boat, and I was sitting with Randall Kaufman in the back of the boat, and we're eating lunch. And I just tied it on. I got it, because it's all marabou. I threw it over the side to get it wet. And I got my biggest cutty of the day with a fucking rod hanging off. I almost pulled the rod out of the boat. I looked at Randall. I go, I guess they like it, but you can't count it. Jeez, I didn't know what the noise was when the rod was taken off. I just had the fucking fly hanging out. So duplicate that when you can. So anyway, back to your original question. I digress as usual. Read the water is the best thing you can learn to do. And then I would put in there somewhere a caveat is, you've got to know what the fly is, then you have to be able to move the fly. And we were talking earlier about practicing. I like people to try to go out and at least spend 5 minutes, which is an eternity for somebody who wants to start catching fish, right? But if you'll take 5 minutes and just practice your cast in 3 different directions. Downstream is a static. It doesn't take anything. It just holds there. Now go cross stream, now go upstream and move your fly. And I don't care if it's a dry fly or not. Not all dry flies should be set dead on the water. You should be twitching your caddis. You should have the ability to twitch a caddis. You should, if you're not actively fishing hoppers, you're leaving half your fish on the bank. And so if you take 5 minutes to practice, I don't give a shit what it is. 5 minutes of shooting arrows. I was reading one of Ted's books, Nugent, and he said most of it, and I've known Ted. I did stage security for him. I didn't know him though. I just met him, but he was a fan of Fred Bears, and my dad and Fred. I grew up in northern Michigan, and my dad was an insurance guy, and he wrote Fred Bear's first insurance policies way back when. So I was actually sitting on Fred Bear's lap when I was a kid, listening to stories, right? And but Ted said how he goes out and he runs 100 to 200 arrows almost every day of his life. Well, I don't know many people that do anything that much. And, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But I'm saying 5 minutes. Yeah. 5 minutes of practice. How hard is that? Yeah. But like the guy told you, dropping the quarters, 10 in, you're going to go, fuck it, I'm done.
Well, I mean, that's what it takes to be good at anything, whether it's fishing, photography, hunting, whatever. And I mean, that's, like I said, my brain has to be challenged. But, also failure is a really good teacher, right? Especially if you're not good at losing, which I've had some failures the rivers that are around me, right? I mean, the first time, so my buddy Dan, he's one of my best friends. He was my dentist. He is my dentist, and he bugged me last year to go. So anyway, this year he gets me to go. And the first time we float, it was February 1st, and it cold. But we caught, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So he's like, man, that thing's fishing good. He's talking about the depths, and I've got I think I had a hothead or a Ray Charles or something on, and a Dan bug, which he ties. And, I brought this little bitch net like you use in the high country. And he didn't say a whole lot, but I saw his net, and I'm like, I mean, this is, I was like, are you fucking compensating? Well, the first fish I hook, the float when you put in, I'm not going to, whatever, like a lot of people know this already, but where you put in just past that's a bridge, I hooked onto a big one. I'm just listening to what Dan's telling me. He's just, doing what I'm told, right? And so mend a little bit, boom, hit a fish, and I'm like, okay, so for me, I've never been a big drag guy. Like, drags are kind of the devil in some ways, right? You don't want to, I guess, I don't know what your feelings are on that, but I'm not a big guy on
I think they're worthless.
Yeah, okay. So, I get that fish in, we catch a bunch of fish. So then I'm like, okay, now I'm addicted in day one. So I'm Googling my ass off, learning different, because he runs inline, right? Dan just runs inline no matter what. He doesn't really very much for that. So then I was looking at bounce rigs, running droppers. Anyway, day two, I'm walking to, second day I went walking to go to the hole where I thought I should catch fish, which there was plenty of rainbows in there. But I'm just kind of chucking my shit out in front of me, walking, just keeping it from catching moss. And I hit a run that's just like 6-8 inches deep, let it drift down a little bit, and I mean 22-inch brown. Didn't even I'm like, holy shit, and takes off. and again, I have enough knowledge to not look too stupid, but not enough knowledge to know what I'm doing. So takes off, we get it in, biggest brown, right? I've caught, obviously to date, biggest brown I've ever caught, and 22-inch brown is, to me, is a big fish. It was skinnier, but
it's
big.
Huge.
And
it's huge.
So I get that in. Well, I just, it's just like a monster, right? So we're doing pretty well, and I'm learning, but I'm also losing big fish. I learned immediately I don't run 5X. I went straight to 3. Tip it for this water for what we're doing, just bigger fish. Plus, I'm not used to having 11 foot of shit and trying to hold my right arm out to net the thing myself, right? So I've lost. So I'm about as flexible as
You're
fucking.
painting a pretty ugly picture right now.
Oh, I'm about as flexible as rebar, right? So kind of, bringing it full circle or whatever. It's like, those are the things where okay, I've got some deficiencies. I gotta work on these deficiencies, right? So I need to figure this out. The other one is line management. Like, I threw a zoo cougar up dead drifting, and off 6 foot off the bank, straight down, heavier water. And every now and then I just twitch the bobber, right? Just twitching the Cougar. And I've got about 16 inches and a pretty heavy amount of weight just to get it down. But I mean, fucking mythical beast, wham, just hits it and runs straight down river. And I have 20 feet of shit at my feet. And I have my drag set up too tight. Goes straight in, hits drag, snaps, bobber hits me in the head. And I've got the cone of shame on and the fish is giving me the middle finger. I'm like, okay, I fucking suck. I have got to work on some things. So it's been interesting because these are the things I'm talking about is, if you don't take notes on everything you do and then work on that of like, okay, line management, drag, don't have your drag set too tight. You know, obviously like there's a lot to it. And if you just go out, fish and go home and don't assess how much you suck, it doesn't do any good to keep working on the things that you, like I can cast. I don't need to work on casting. Got a lot of other problems. So like those are the things you want to take notes and work on them.
Yeah, exactly. I took notes as you were talking. So, and I'll finish with that too. But the first thing you said about drag, I don't believe in dragging a fish. I think you want a reel that doesn't overspin. If you go, you said you're from Oregon, right?
Yep,
originally?
Yep.
You know, I grew up steelhead fishing and the West Coast a lot. And I was fishing with Harry Lemire, one of the most famous steelheaders in history of the world. And just on a run one day, and I asked him, I said, what's with all you guys in your, because I came from the Great Lakes, you know, smaller rivers, and we use drags, right? And I said, what's with all you West Coast guys in your hardy reels with no drags? Is it some sort of cult you guys are in? And he always called me young man. He goes, well, young man, what happens when you drag a fish? I go, I drag his ass into the bank. And he goes, no, you don't. The fish turns away from your drag and runs away from whatever's pulling on his face. And they go downstream almost 100% of the time. And I went, huh. So I went out and tried it. I went with no drag, hooked my fish, and the fish just jumps and does what it's supposed to and stays. It just runs from the line, right? And you. But then I put about 6 pounds of drag against it. The son of a bitch turned around, went straight downstream. I'm like, holy shit. I guess a couple hundred years of doing this makes people figure things out. And so I, at that point, almost never drag a fish. They have no idea you're the reason they're hooked. They don't know you're there. They just know that there's something pulling and they go away from it, and downstream's the easiest. So I like a drag that barely, just doesn't overspool. It just doesn't spin line out. And then you also said something about 22. That really pisses me off because, and somehow people have told me that's my fault. It's bullshit. 20-inch fish used to be a really great fish in the world. And as cameras and fisheye lenses and all those other fucked up pictures people take, 20 became like a normal fish. That's a giant fish. And a 22 is a really good fish. 24 is a hallmark fish. And anything above it, you're probably fucking lying. I mean, put them in a bunk board one time. I mean, I carry those in my boat. So you got to, like you do it at One Fly, you know, a bunk board, so you bump their heads against the thing and you see how long they are.
Yeah.
I mean, we were going to do a T-shirt in my shop that said 23, the 17, the new 23.
Yeah.
Because I hear about more 23-inch fish on the Madison. I'm like, God damn, I must really suck. I sure don't see 23-inch fish on that river.
Same thing.
And I'm hunting them.
Yeah, same thing in hunting, right? Like Ike Eastman once said to me, he goes, what happened to, what happened to a 160-inch mule deer being a good deer, right? Or whatever, right? And I guess I'm a little more, I know what I have here, right? And so reeling in 16 to 8, like when you reel in a 12-inch fish here, it's like you got a little dick. You're like, what happened? Yeah. Like, Jesus, like I'm spoiled, right? And so, I mean, when I, have caught some of the bigger ones that I've caught, and I consider big in that 18 to 22, like, okay, I've done something. That's also when you really figure out your deficiencies. Like, yeah, it's like shooting a young deer, right? Like those are easier to shoot. Once a deer's 4 years old, 5, they're hard to kill. Like they're just a different animal. And you learn a lot. I mean, and like I was talking about the deficiencies, and I figured you'd get a kick. I've got another one. You were talking about your line or your fly over the boat. I'm casting. I got a strong wind, so on my back cast, I'm letting it lay out in a big pool behind me, and then I'm casting it back forward. There's just a lot of wind, and it was an easier setup. So I back cast, land my bobber, everything lands, and I get a phone call. I answer the phone, right? And I go to forward cast, and in that pool is where the big brown trout live, obviously, because I magically, my shit landed in one's mouth, and on my forward cast, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And we got it. We got it to the net. We got it close to the net, right? We got it. It went to current, and then I just let it. I'm like, I'll let it spool me till it wears out. I don't want to put drag on this, within reason, because it's already in the current. Well, that helped, right? Like that definitely made him come out of the current. I got him in, and he wasn't 30 by any means, but he was definitely pushing that 2-foot mark. And I'm like, I don't even know if I want to tell this story, because it does not depict a great picture of my intelligence level, right? I mean, but I learned, because I'm like, I'd never fished that pool. It's a big eddy, right? Coming off a very steep run, or a very swift run. It's from a riffle, and it swedges down. I could tell you'd know exactly where it was. You fished this river. But anyway, again, it's learning, right? You're learning all the time. And so it's been interesting. Like I said, I've lost, I've told people when I'm giving them shit, like, I've wounded more animals than you shot at, kind of a thing. Like, I've hunted longer than you, just to be a dick. When you have all those negative things happen, I've lost far more big fish than I've brought in the short, 3 months of where I'm at. But all of those things I take notes, and I'm like, that is not going to happen again. Because it's, there's nothing worse than walking back to the truck with the cone of shame of, I had 3 big ones on, but I fucking suck. Yeah. It's horrible.
Well, in that was my third note, what you just said. I'm going to, you asked me the 3 things people do wrong, but those are all associated with pre-hookup, right?
Yeah.
And once you've got a fish on, that's where the tire hits the road, right? And so, and I would tell you a couple things about that also. First and foremost, it's called a fight, right? Well, there's supposed to be an analogy that it's a fight. It's a life-threatening deal, but it's not. It's also the one thing, if you think about it, people panic in their fight, which is bad, but it's all supposed to be the whole reason you're fishing is so you get to fight the damn fish, right? It's not so they jump in your fucking waders and take a picture. You're supposed to be, it's like hunting. The hunt is supposed to be the thing, right? And so, but in your fishing, in your fighting the fish, the first and most important thing you need to do is sit your fucking legs right there and stop. Do not run from the fight. You don't get in a ring or get in a fight and run backwards. That's not a fight. That's called fleeing. And you're not fleeing from the goddamn thing. You're fighting it, and you should be enjoying it, right? So what most people do is they look for an exit strategy the second they hook a fish, and they start going backwards. And going backwards in a river is stupid. You're going to hit the ground sooner or later. But if people would just settle down, set the hook, and say to yourself, I'm not moving. I'm standing my ground. And you watch people on the river, the first thing they do is take steps. They hook the fish and start running backwards. And they in their position like they want this fight to be over because they want that glory picture. And they stop thinking completely. It's like when you get a kid in a ring his first time and you snap him in the head with the left hand, he blinks his eyes and stands there, and now they're just hiding, right? Well, 2 years from now, the kid's not going to be sitting there hiding. He's going to be returning. And when you do the same thing when you're in the river, you set the hook, and now you concentrate on your fish to see, what he's doing, where he's going. Hold on. Goodbye, babe. Kissing the girl goodbye. So, excuse me. There. So anyway, you set up, and when you're going to fight, you set the hook, and then you should be understanding what the fish is doing, which way is he going, because all you can do there is hold on, and then you can only accentuate the fish's movement. You can't turn a real fish's head the opposite direction until the very end of a fight when they're tired, right? And so fish fighting is the second part of what people do. Like so you figured out how to hook them, but then you're just standing there like a damn mailbox by the side of the road looking at the fish, not thinking like, well, I have nothing, I can do nothing here. Well, that's the bad part. You do something. You need to, like I was talking with Andy Mill about, we did a podcast one time here back a few months ago. And one of the things that he said he learned to do is he learned to turn 150 pounds. He learned how to turn it because he's the most successful tarpon angler in history of the world. And he's a little guy. He's not some big, he's not Flip Pallet. He's a guy who had to learn how to manage the rod to turn the fish. And it doesn't matter what size fish it is. You have to understand how to turn the fish, continue his momentum, make up your ground, be ready to give again, because it's a fight. You don't win every fight. You don't win every round. You got to just kind of give and take. And so, but the exit strategy is what people think of. I've had over a dozen people step out of my fucking boat.
Back out.
I mean, I'm not shitting you. They hook a fish. The first thing people do is they pick the rod up. That's the worst thing you can do. In one of my books, I wrote about fighting a fish should stay in a box in front of basically in front of your chest. Your hand should never go in the air, ever. It should stand right there, and you manipulate your wrist back and forth, but not your arm. When people set the hook and they put their arm straight in the air, you're so screwed right now. You have zero control of anything. Your arm's high, and it comes from people saying keep your rod high. Well, it's your tip of your rod. And then it doesn't mean high, it means so your rod can flex. And so you suddenly you've got a person with their rod, and the next thing they do, they look straight up at their rod, they reach above their right hand, if they're a right-handed angler, and grab the line to make it up and pull it down. Well, now they're just totally out of control. And then you'll see them trying to bite the freaking line, like to get it control. Well, they're out of control to start with. So that would be the first. Once you've got your fish, relax, keep your hands in front of yourself, move your rod back and forth, just like a windshield wiper right in front of you, right? You don't have to have these super over accentuated movements, and then you're in control and you can think. That goes to the fourth note that you said, take notes. I physically take notes every day in my boat. I've been guiding for 50 years. I still take notes about everything. And I mean, even water configurations or boulder sets or anything that like, boy, I would pull a fish out of this. I've never seen a fish come out of something like this. Was it a fluke? Or all my fly designs come after tying a fly and having it fail.
Yeah.
Right. And so I keep a notebook with me all the time. I mean, period.
Kelly, I hate to interrupt you. I've had 7 phone calls. This looks like an emergency at my work in Virginia Beach. Can I call you back in like 20 minutes?
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, this is going good. I don't want to fuck this up. I apologize. I don't know what's going on, but I'll call you back in 20. We don't forget. We were talking about fighting the fish because my memory is fucking horrible. So fighting the fish.
Yeah, that's why I take notes.
Yeah. All right, dude. I'll call you right back.
That's it.
All right. Yeah. Sorry about the break. I had to take a business call there, but we were talking about fighting fish. And one of the things that you said, which I kind of knew, I had people, in my life that were much like yourself, very in depth in their fly fishing, and they always talked about the fighting stance or whatever. And like when you're attacked by a grizzly, you don't run backwards, you step into it. When you've got the gun, step into it, step into danger. And one of my buddies is like, and he's a shit talker too, and he talked about that. He's like, you hook the fish, you don't run to fucking shore, you fight the fish. And you said the same thing a minute ago. It's like whether you're nipple deep in water, waist deep, knee deep, get good footing, don't walk backwards because you're going to fall in, and fight the fish. And it sounds like you've got the exact same kind of mentality with that.
Well, I mean, you just, if you go to a river or if you guide and you watch I'll be pretty. I'll even throw a lot of really great anglers into this that I've seen do it. I'd say 98% of the anglers set the hook and take a step backwards no matter what, almost instinctually. And you should set the. It's no different than squaring off in a ring. You don't just start running backwards. Why would you do that? You got to feel. You watch fighters; they'll sit and they'll pitter patter around a little bit. Throwing jabs and whatever, and you're just trying to figure it out. But if you step backwards, you're retreating, and when they do that, God help you if you're on the Madison or on the Wind, like where you are. Step over backwards, your ass is upside down. And so when you set up, the idea is set and see what's going to happen. And I'm going to tell you, I did it in a video. If a fish gets below you, you really never, people start chasing fish below them. When you think about it, if the fish is running downstream and you start running with it, you're on a leash. You're not doing anything. And you're totally out of control. You're not thinking. You'll see people racing down the banks, and I've done it. Everybody's done it. Once they're below you, I did it with a video on Nymphing with Johnny in one of my not podcasts, but YouTube things. If you can free spool a fish that gets below you, it will turn around instantly. And if you think about this, the fish doesn't know you're the reason. People give fish way too much credit. Fish doesn't know you're the reason. He's got a hook in his face. He's not afraid of you. He's running from the tension on the line. And wherever the tension is, he's going to go in the path of least resistance. So when a fish goes downstream and he takes off and you start pulling back, what's he going to do? He's not going to go, oh, that hurts more. Let me turn around. Fuck no, he's going to keep running. And then he goes and goes and goes. And that's when they get to the point where you're so far away from them, people take off running. They probably are going to kill the fish anyway because they've just exhausted it. But if you can free spool them, the second they don't feel the pressure on the line, they turn around. They don't want to go downstream. They don't breathe well going downstream. And so they turn around, and immediately when you think about it, the physics of the whole thing, the fly line is in the water. When the fish turns around, where's the pressure? Behind them. I mean, instantly the pressure on that hook is pulling from below it, so it swims away from the line again and it goes upstream. I mean, it's a seriously old trick for steelheaders. They just totally free spool that line and stand there. And if you stand there long enough, fish will swim right past you. And you just keep reeling it in, not putting any. But what do people do? As soon as the fish is lift their rod in the air and start reeling like a son of a bitch, right? And wiggling the line around. You don't have to. You can just relax. But it's really hard to do. It's hard for people. I know. We just they don't want to enjoy the fight. That's why you're there. You're there to fight the fish. Yeah. So it's kind of weird, but most people have to. It takes a while to get composed to do that, and it gets to take a while to get composed not to have that. I think it starts as a child. I mean, when I was a kid, before you could reel well, your dad would tell you, your mom, whoever took you fishing, would say, just walk backwards. You drag the fish, bluegills, right?
Yeah.
Drag them on the shore. I don't know if that's where we got it or what, but
the free spool thing though, like, my buddy Dan, like he'll be farting around whatever he's got a fish on, and hey, let me grab the net, and he's just holding it in his hand, free spool. I mean, he's like, man, they don't come off. He's like, no. Maybe if you got a barbless and they come out of the water shaking their head, or there's obviously not, there's variables, but he's like, man, they don't come off. Like he's like, no. He just doesn't worry about it.
They don't. You can pull them off, but you can't. There's flesh tear, there's line strength, and then there's hook strength. But you're very seldom going to have a fish come up. I used to do this thing with Lefty Crane way back when we had barbless was first coming out. And there was this TU school that I was a part of, huge school. I don't remember, it had like 20 instructors, and we all volunteered and did this three-day weekend thing. And Lefty would take a fly, so they were little trout ponds, and he cast a fly out, little Royal Wolf barbless, hook the fish and put the rod down and go to lunch. And then he'd come back and fish is still on because he's got perfect tension. He's just pulling the line. That's all it takes. And so, yeah, they don't come off. They just, I mean, of course, there's no evers or nevers in our business. The whitetail doesn't always do this, and he doesn't never do that, right? Fish, they can shake, they can do whatever, who knows? Maybe it's barely hooked, but as a whole, your buddy's right. You don't have to panic. And think about a hunting situation. Every time you got within 30 yards of something, you started breathing really hard and just accelerated towards your animal. I mean, what's the difference? We're doing the same thing. We've run from them, but it's the same composure that in anything, in any sport, it's, any activity, composure is what seals the deal. Like you were talking about shooting those arrows, if it was $1 million a shot, you get composed a lot quicker.
Well, and
you lose.
Yeah, or you go back to Foursquare. But I mean, one of the things when I went from compound to traditional archery, I shot a stick bow for like 7 years, I guess. And the one thing that probably, and when I did that, it was almost to prove a point, because people are like, hey, you suck, you use technology and you would never kill anything if you, anyway. So I which was true, because I definitely can shoot far. So, but what I learned, like one of the things that seems obvious, is the animal does not know you're there. And if he continues to not know you're there, he's going to do the same thing he's always done. It's up to you to change that. So if you shut up and just don't move, the animal's not going to change his habit. He's going to do the exact same thing. And that's another thing, like fishing, kind of parallel or whatever. Like, a lot of people don't realize the obtrusiveness they are making in the water, where if you just get on the bank and you watch a fish and you watch where it's at and what it's doing, especially on clear days, and the wind is great for that. When you have days you can see, and I'm not talking like spawning beds, like reds. I'm just saying like the pools they hang out in. Yeah. And that fish is there, and you've watched him for 30 minutes, then you climb down there or wade in, and all of a sudden the fish isn't there anymore. And it's like, oh man, he must have swam upstream. It's like, no, he saw your dumb ass, or you did something to spook him out of there, or your cast was insane, whatever the case may be. And again, I'm paralleling this, saying there's a lot of the same, because when you look at a river and you look at those fish, they don't get that big from being dumb, and they hide in spots, it seems like, that most people just wouldn't. And I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, you talk about that. The bigger fish like to just, they're like a fat person. They just, and I fat shame, and I may get yelled at for that, but they just sit there. They don't do anything. They just want to sit there and relax. And it's up to you to fuck that up. As I'm saying that, talk a little bit about that when you're hunting big fish. What is your, I don't want to say mentality, and I know you did 2 podcasts on this, but the mistakes people make on the approach, if they're wade fishing, take the boat out of it. When they're going in there, how many are scaring the fish off before they even get there? And what are they doing to do that?
Well, first, probably the most common thing is that just like they're nocturnal creatures, like a deer, right? They're not programmed to eat in the daytime once they become predators. And there's a big difference, because juvenile fish are not nocturnal so much as an adult fish. And so they tend to stay in certain areas, which becomes feeding grounds for the big fish. But they are programmed to eat in the daytime. And it's not to say that some big fish, to a degree, won't eat during the daytime also, as far as like a bug. But once they hit that 22, 3, 4 mark, it gets really much less likely that they're day feeding. But most people will go and they'll apply all principles to all fish equally. And so they'll think that, well, there's a bunch of fish here, so the big fish is here too. And that's just not the case. The big fish, mostly people walk through their fish before they ever get to them. because, and you've read a lot of my stuff. I did a lot of diving, and I did a lot of, and then 50 years of guiding and not targeting. That's only been a 20-year thing for the trophy thing. But most of the really big fish, and I assume it's a lot like a big whitetail or mule. They're just hanging out. They're just laying down and bedding up. They don't necessarily sleep as much like a mammal does, but they do get very relaxed. And they just don't want to be on the treadmill. They want to be, first and foremost, I tell people, where you find it easy to walk and where you walk is probably where your big fish are. And you don't believe it, so you walk right through the son of bitches. And they'll usually most of your giant fish will be on an inside because it's softer. And they'll usually be in 3 foot or less of water, which when I was diving, I'd love to have my first 100 hours back because I never went anywhere where the fish were. I kept looking in the log jams, outside of those, the really deep runs. And I never saw a big fish in a 5 foot run, ever. Not to say they're not there. Like I said, I say it all the time. There's no always and no never in fishing. And so, but there are regular events. And that was that all the fish that I saw were in less than 3 foot of water. Very little. My analogies for the average angler is that I tell them if you're standing in the water knee deep and it's pushing you around, you don't have to worry about a big fish being there. They do not. Might get displaced for a second, but they're going to go back and they're going to sit in a cushion of something where it doesn't have to be a cushion behind a boulder or anything like that. It just means that they can sit there and they just barely have to move themselves to stay in place. That's where they're going to stay all day. And so, and if you look in like the wind where you fish a lot, the big boulder sections, a big boulder can create a negative current for 20 feet behind it, where the current actually goes, when it goes around, the hydraulic effect, either up and over it or around both sides of it, it spins the water in a cylindrical fashion. So it actually pushes the water behind the rocks forward. And so they'll find that theme that makes it very simple. And and this gets me a lot of shit, people. I don't give fish cognitive reasoning or much of a memory at all, if they have any. I don't think that's how they operate. They don't fear. A lot of people talk about them fearing birds. I don't buy into that. I've watched fish. I live 50 feet from the river. My house I can sit and look at one of the best runs in the river and watch, and I got a shit ton of ospreys and eagles that live in my yard, it's a big yard. But so I've seen them take actively feeding trout, 16 to 18 inches long, an osprey hit one, blow the water up, fly away with the trout in its talons, and 30 to 40 seconds later, the fish are sitting there eating dry flies again.
So they don't have a memory too long, and they have to feed. They have to just be animals, right? And so my basic thing there is if we don't fish insides, and if you'll look at places where people fish, it's usually on the inside to fish. Even if it's a little bit of a bend, they'll be on the inside of the bend, and they'll fish to the faster water. And so if you can position yourself to say, hit the water you want to walk in first, you will be a lot better off. And you'll see, I would say as the two places that fish right, more big fish, not juvenile, not pissants, 12 to 18-inch fish, which are great fish. That's a great trout, but it's not a real fish. And if you take that out of the equation, you won't hurt the smaller fish zones where they're actively feeding by fishing the inside first. But you will completely ruin your chance at a big fish if you walk into it before you get there, before you go to that, what we've been taught, because we've been taught most of our lives about feeding zones, right? So feeding zones, and there were some great videos done. Rick Hafley did one of the greatest videos ever, 3M video, way back when.
And he made a comment that the biggest fish takes up the primary feeding zone at the head because he gets the bugs first. Well, not really true, but true to a point where maybe an 18-inch fish takes that spot and is actively feeding, and the other ones are behind him or getting, leftovers or whatever. Not sure about that either, but it's a good theory. It's a fun theory, and it's true as far as you get a big feeding zones, but you will not find a 26-inch fish in that feeding zone. They aren't out there sharing. They don't eat bugs. They're going to be right where you walked in to fish that. You're going to spook your fish out, and you'll never see it because they don't run. In 200-plus hours of diving, I never had a big fish bolt away from me. They swam away. I had one that I swear was sizing my ass up. I mean, I swam up. I got 10 feet from it. It didn't even really much care about it. It just sat there, and they all did the same thing. They just swam away from me. Not fast, not like a juvenile darting. Just kind of gave you whatever. I just moved out. They didn't run panicked in any fashion. So I think that's what happens when you're wading around. If you fish a lot in the evenings, you'll see fish settling in, bigger fish, not the giants, but bigger fish. They kind of get more relaxed in the evening, and they get on a rhythm, which, it's getting closer to their natural feeding times. And so the biggest thing on trophy hunting would be just not racing into that soft water. And one of my favorite runs ever in history is on the upper big wind above the gazebo. I can't remember what that landing's called. But there's a big weed bed above that. I call them checkerboards because they're perfectly lined. Love watercress beds. And if you can get gaps between those, a foot to 2 feet around, that is probably my favorite hunt for really big fish. And I've never seen, people call it frog water and stuff. That's where big fish go to rest. And I never see anybody. I see guys turn their boats around and row through them. Yeah. Which makes me happier than a pig in shit, boy. You just keep doing that. You keep getting to that fucking fast water. That'll be great.
So getting with the getting not away, but like with the streamer fishing and the trophy fishing, but like going into like on the nymphing, you had a bunch of videos I've watched and talking a little bit about that. So with the like I think you got a lot of videos, man. It gets confusing, but you did one on inline and then running a dropper rig. So like obviously the Euro nymphing thing now is huge. My buddy Chris Horn, I fish with him a lot. He just kind of got into it. There's a guy, I think he's called Tactical Fly Fisher, Devin Olson. He's real big into the Euro nymphing here in Landers.
He's spectacular.
So like
Devin's one of the best for sure. Euro guys. Yeah, he's really good angler all around. He's a great angler all around.
I think he's an astrophysicist or something. He's smart as shit, from what I understand. But when like back in the day, right? The weighted, like the tungsten, the Euro beaded tungsten nymphs or whatever that they use now. So, as I'm figuring out my system, and like. What am I trying to say here? There's no always and no never. Like you say that all the time. I get that. But like one of the things that it seemed like if I was running, especially where I'm at, because you've got pretty deeper water and a little bit more current, it's not shallow in spots where you have good runs that are definitely 3 to 5 feet where you're going to, like you say, catch the piss ants. What do you suggest? Do you suggest the guys running a bobber to run those tungstens as their heavier fly and then run 16 inches back to run, in the case now, like some kind of a blue wing type of an emerger or whatever. But,
right.
What with where I'm at, and I'm asking this, because I'm going to steal it and go use it. What's your general system for where I'm at for nymphing? What would you use? And do you mess with the tungsten beads much? Yeah,
well, it depends. I mean, I grew up in an era of understanding hatches and migration of your bugs and shit. So you you place everything on purpose. And now they've dumbed it down so far with these freaking tungsten shit and this inline. And the problem with all that is it works better. So there's no arguing it. I've done lots of videos on this, picking on the Euro trash, and for fun, because most of them are friends of mine. And I do it too, bud. I do it a lot. I did a lot longer before these people did, because we did it. That's how we did it in the old days. Weighted flies, inline, and we fished monofilament. And we did that in the 70s. And so, and Joe Humphreys damn near got run out of the business for tight lining in the Madison. I mean, one of the first fishing shows ever was doing that. But I prefer to do drop shot, which you called it a bounce rig. I've heard it called, people call it the pogo rig. As you know, I love bass fishing, and all types of fishing, but I particularly like bass fishing because the technicalities of it and the huge money that's in it. Huge money brings the best anglers. The BSS just was won by a 21-year-old kid this year. That's a multi-million-dollar contract the rest of that kid's life, right? He didn't get there because he's bad. He's the best at what he does. And so, but I call drop shotting is what that was called way back when in the bass world. And in some ways it was even before that with drop rigs for perch. They called those drop rigs too, where you put the weight below your flies. And so the point of that, and when I do it, like I'll do it with a fly line, not with a competition lines or whatever they call the level little things. I still like to, the difference between fly fishing to me is not running a 20-foot leader to, 023 running line or something like that. I like to be able to just switch from right in line, like fly line to fly line. No switch anything but your leader. But for the average cat, if you're going to run an indicator, then it's completely, you can still run double tungsten and do pretty well. But because I grew up with it, I'm sure that's why I like it. And I don't give a shit about catching every fish in that river, which you can do with the Euro system. It's almost impossible to believe how successful you can be with the systems. If you're a Devin Olson, you could pretty much, I think, take 80% of the fish in every run. I mean, these guys are that good. And because they're curious creatures. They'll mouth a fly. In the old days when we gut fished and kelp fish, you'd be amazed what you found in their stomachs, right? And so, but as just a regular cat that doesn't want to go through and specialized rods and long rods and the specialized lines and all that shit, with a drop shot system, I put my weight 6 inches from my first fly. And I've got diagrams on it, on how to do it. I used to do it with double dropper loops. I started kind of more going to the bottom, the point fly, the fly furthest from you, closest to the lead. I run that one in line, eye to eye. And so then I put one 16 inches above it. And so what that does is when you're Euro nymphing, everything is about feel and vision. You're watching your line, your leader, mostly to see if it moves, because they can mouth things so quickly that it's really hard to feel it. But you're going by sense of feel and visual and watching things. But if you're on an indicator, you're letting the indicator do the job of detecting that strike, right? So if you put the lead on the bottom and then a fly, no matter what, as long as the lead, just like with the Euro, the heaviest tungsten fly at the bottom, no matter what, when they touch those, you see it or feel it. And so I do dropper to a fly 16 inches above. And the reason I go 16 inches is because that usually you're not going in slow enough water that they're going at the same, they're not directly above and below each other. You're going to be leading that, pulling the fly downstream. And so that upper fly is going to have an angle, it's going to be downstream more than the lead is. And so you're going to be about 8 to 10 inches, probably different water levels. The reason you fish two different flies is that you fish two different straps, two different water levels. So you don't have both flies in the same level. And the point of that originally was that you were trying to predict the emergence, that some flies should be down lower. As the hatch goes out, progresses, as the emergence progresses, you're going to have a fly above the nymph or the larva, and then you'll have a different style of fly above that, right? So we have a mayfly nymph on the bottom, and you're going to have a mayfly emerger above it, and you're fishing two zones and trying to figure out which one's, best, which one they're going to get onto. And then you can adjust with a drop shot rig. You can adjust, say they move up, everything's on the upper flies. Well, you can do that, add another 12 inches of mono to your lead zone, and now both flies are, a foot and a half above the bottom. And so you could fish two zones. But most people aren't going to get that complicated with it. They're just going to sit and nymph it. And so most feeding activity is within 6 inches of the bottom to begin with. And so if I put a drop shot lead at the bottom and my next fly is 6 inches, now I'm letting the lead has to touch bottom to tell you that you're down there. And most nymphing, when in doubt, add a shot and you'll be better off, right? Just make sure you are touching, and then my fly is 6 inches above that, or 8, or whatever you choose, and that fly is always in the fish's zone, right? And if they're moving up, if the emergence is progressing and they're moving up through the water column, your next fly is a foot to 16 inches above the first one. You're kind of covering both zones. And then a couple things about running indicators that will really help people. The one thing I think is done wrong mostly is I hear guys screaming, mend. Well, I like to fish the apex to the strike zone. I form a triangle in front of me, and I want to be directly across from where I think the fish is at. And so with that in mind, when you hear people say mend, they'll mend right when the line gets dead in front of them. That disrupts the flow of the flies, picks them off the bottom, makes them do an abrupt movement up because you flip your line. And it's always at the wrong moment, because you should be positioning yourself at the point. Like it's a piece of pizza. You're at the point of the pizza and the crust is out in front of you. You should be really controlling 5 feet of that right dead in front of you where your strike zone should be, because you should be positioning yourself into that strike zone. That takes away the brainless, mindless throwing a fucking bobber out and just letting it go down. And that when you watch somebody that's good with a nymph rig, they aren't brainlessly waiting for that thing to shoot upstream. They're waiting. Maybe it doesn't even pause. Maybe it it barely stops moving or barely goes one way or the other. They already know they've got a fish, because they're not fishing the whole run as one piece. They're fishing it. When you watch most people throw a bobber, they'll throw that thing as far up as they can, start stripping line and hoping that it's, like you're fishing a night crawler under a fill bobber. You're not. You're trying to get the subtlest of detections. So I like people to fish a 5-foot section of water where they know their fly is exactly where it belongs. And to do that, you have to lead your indicator. You don't get to throw that loop and let it run out there and fish for you. You keep tension on, below your line is below the indicator as much as you can. That means that you'll be fishing a specific zone as opposed to fishing the entire river. That's just, as I say, hope less, fish more, or hope less, stalk more. It's the same thing. Don't hope it, dictate it. You fish a 5-foot section of water, that's what you're fishing. It might take you 10 feet above that, casting 10 feet above where you think the fish is, and to get there, but then right in front of you, you fish it. Really, really great anglers at that, including the Euro guys, are fishing about 10, 20 inches. They know where their fish are, and they're putting that fly, giving them that opportunity, and they're not mending and playing with. That's the difference between Euros, that they're in constant tension. They're not throwing so far that they can't detect the strike. Where with indicator, people tend to just, they fish it like they're fishing bluegills with a bobber. They just throw it out there and wait for the bobber to go, and go underwater. Well, that's called an automatic. You should have felt or seen it before the bobber went under. And so I don't know if that answers your question. It's just kind of
no, it does, because I mean, it's last night, that last big brown that I caught pretty much did exactly what you said not to do. I got downstream, yarded, I don't know, whatever, a shitload of line straight upstream, drifted it down to me, like all the way. And but I was yarding out so much. I mean, because casting, I mean, and I'm learning this. I'm making fun of casting fars can be really a problem. Like, I mean, I say a problem, like I take advantage of that, because just because I can cast that far doesn't mean you can fish that far, I guess, which is like a down thing for me. So I drifted the exact same spot, probably, I don't know, 15 drifts down or something. Got my fat ass out of the water, and because I knew where this one, basically there where these boulders are underwater, that it should have held fish, and did exactly what you said, and caught the fish. Is got about 10 feet above it because I wanted weight to get down in the current. First drift to where you talk about the pizza, right in the middle of the pizza. The bobber didn't do a whole lot. It just kind of, I know you want to call it, wiggled a hair, and off I got it. That's the last fish I had caught. Yeah. And so that's the one thing I'm trying to really work on myself, is not yard out 60 feet of line or 40 feet and have this extremely long drift that's mostly ineffective, is have 5 feet of a damn good drift where it should be. And that's not a small penis thing or fucking what. I don't know. Maybe I watched whatever river runs through it too much trying to yard out my line, but that's something I got to work on, because I will do that. You know what I mean? Like I'll be like, man, I want to get a 40-foot long drift where, 80% of that's not a good drift. It's just drifting, but it's not a good drift.
No, and it's saturated. And in reality, just to go back to the streamer world, you watch me fish, I seldom fish 30 feet away from me with a streamer, right? I much prefer to control 5 foot. I read the water first. Most important thing, we talked about that earlier. I don't just throw the fucking fly wherever. It's not relative. You should be able to identify where your fish are. Back to the first thing we talked about, what's the number one thing done wrong? Not reading water. Yeah. Should be reading the water. Just think of it as a hunting situation. You don't just walk through a field. You go to where the fish are, or the animal are, and then you stalk, right? It's the same thing. And so, and especially if you're taking the boat out of the situation, and I'm talking about being a boat, I don't just throw willy-nilly. I'm looking at water that I've, over 40 years, have figured out that this is where they should be. You did it on that fish last night. You said this is where it should be. So you go in and you fish to it, right? I've always had this mantra: cast less, stalk more. And you think about it, it's kind of like when you said you went to recurve and you said, yeah, I was kind of cheating because I could shoot so far. Well, one of my favorite quotes, I mean, Fred Bear's like one of my heroes, right? And he had a quote, with the best camouflage is called "sit down and be quiet." Yeah. Just it's the same thing. Other here, you stalk a little bit more. Whereas, and for me personally, that blind ass cast that catches a fish, I have on film. I broke fish off. Like, oh my God, did that just happen to me? Did I really have my line hanging in the water and got a fish? I'm not going to show that. Yeah. Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, it's like you should the like when you stalk an animal and you put on the alternate stalk and you make that shot. Do you want the guy that comes up and blindly launched a fucking arrow 100 yards and happened to hit one in the head and kill it? Is it the same thing? Hell no, it's not. It's like when you're fishing is no different. And so if you'll see that better anglers get the less they do this whole huck the thing way out there. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Renee Herrick. He's one of the best dry fly guys ever, and very, very, very native, very Indian in his thought processes. And I think he is part native anyway. I don't know. It's probably all French like me. But it's but I watched him one time. One of the best anglers ever stalked this fish, and it took an eternity. I was on the other side of the river, hiding, watching him. It's the only time I've ever seen him fish. And he stalked that thing up, man. It was so impressive. I don't think that fly was 15 feet from that fish. I don't think he was that far. And that's the key. You know, he's targeted on purpose. And I say that a lot in my seminars. Make it happen on purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How about here? Do you remember that hit in the back of the head? Hey, dumbass. How about you do it on purpose?
Yeah.
Right? And so you start stalking and reading your water. And to me, the whole satisfaction of this is the fact that I knew it's going to happen right now. Boom. Right? And when that happens enough, that whole dumb luck thing really starts going away. You really don't enjoy it as much, you know, to the point where it's like, we don't even, like on film, I don't even count them. We don't show it. I might show the hit and say, okay, we didn't earn that fish. And so with the drop shot thing, it doesn't really matter what style you use. The only difference between drop shot and the other ones is that you know where both your flies are exactly, and you're not guessing. So if you do fly, lead, fly, you only know where your upper fly is because the lead is the heaviest element. The fly behind that gets below your lead, which makes it very hard to detect eat because your lead's bouncing, but the fly at the point, the furthest away, it's going to get swept downstream below the lead because it's not as heavy. And so you're not necessarily, that system's a little bit better from a boat than it is on foot. But I just don't think, why Euro is so good is your heaviest element is at the bottom. The next one's there. They both get down relatively quickly. But what the difference is you have to guess for a while. Not when you're Devin Olson. The cat's not guessing about anything. He knows exactly where his flies are. But when you first start, when you do a drop shot, knowing that the lead's the furthest thing away from you, you will know exactly where your flies are because the lead's down at the, dragging, and those flies, and when I say dragging, ideally it's only touching now and then. It's just tapping the top of the bottom, whatever it is, and that tells you that your flies are 6 and 18 inches apart, or different, 6 inches off the bottom and 18, whatever it is that you set that up at.
Now,
right?
do you think it's a bad idea to, because I copied your rig that you're talking about, unless it's windy and then droppers are out the fucking window, I'm going to inline if it's super windy because it's just a bitch to cast. But,
I've kind of gone to inline on my point fly anyway, because in particular, when you got juvenile fish, those little 8 to 12 inchers that are in those runs, and they start that wiggle shit, man, you got a fucking macrame project so quick. So when I went to the inline, I just quit it.
So what I have is basically weight 6 inches, 8 inches, and then I don't run eye to eye. I did inline on that one, and then hook eye up, and then I have a barrel swivel 16 to 18 inches above that's going from my button midsection, and then I run the perfection loop at that swivel. And I've definitely, I got a lot less shit on my moss is horrible right now. I have a lot less moss on my hooks than running inline. But running a tungsten on the bottom fly, do you think that's a detriment to get it down quicker? With the split?
As long as it's not getting so low that it's hanging up.
Yeah.
But you should have tension on that so that you kind of stop that in and of itself. You've got tension. You're holding that fly up.
Right.
It's really, it's not just dead. It's not. You have tension on your line, so it's not. The flies shouldn't be flat. You should be somewhere and holding them off bottom.
Here's where the hoping thing came in, where I kind of had the epiphany of like drifting for 40 feet, and you've got 4 different depths in 40 feet. I'm exaggerating that. So it's like, okay, well, if I was just drifting 10, then it wouldn't matter because it's going to have tension perfectly across that 10-foot section. Rather than
you do have an indicator on, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but you get my drift rather than trying to, because then I don't know where my tungsten fly could be, perfect in one section, and then 15 feet later it's hitting moss, and then it's back, because I'm drifting for so long rather than concentrating exactly, the 10, 15, 20 feet of perfect height water or perfect depth water. And again, I know enough to be dangerous, right? But I'm learning, and that was kind of an epiphany of I really got to stop doing this long drifting and yarding, 40, 60 feet out.
No, you've already answered your own question. You're already dialing it in. It's like everything. You're just perfecting the craft there, where you're not hoping. You're. To me, that's what it's all about for me. That's where I have to know I was the one in control of it.
Yeah.
Not that it didn't just happen by mistake, and I can't do that when I yard one out 30 yards, 30 feet. I truly, on a rare occasion, I will get, I'll have a giant boulder, and there's a run out there that I can't access it, right? But I can huck one out. Sure, I'm going to take that. I'm gonna try whatever I can, because there's no way for me to act like Jesus and walk on the water. So if I have to huck one out there so far that it's, but it's such a rare occasion. I can't remember the last time I did it. I just say, I give, you win.
No, that
but you're dialed in right there. Just the fact that you said, okay, I tighten it up. And then you start doing that visualization thing where you know where your flies are. And that's the difference between superstars and just average, is that a superstar knows where their fly is at and knows what it's doing. And that's that Devin Olsen area, that's those guys. That guy, he doesn't guess where his flies are. When you're streamer fishing, I don't guess. When I'm dry fly fishing, I stalk to where I know that there's no way my fly's getting pulled by a current that I don't actually see. What you can make the presentation, and you will get the drift that you want. And that's the difference between really good and just average, is that you understand where your fly is and what the fly is doing at the moment that it needs to be understood. That there's always a small window of opportunity, including nymphing, and more so people blind up streamers a lot too. We were filming last week, we were filming the first new fly fishing show of the season, and we get, and I think it was Jake was in the back of the boat, and he said, 3, 2, boom, pow, fish eat. It's a count. He was counting it down, and he had it dead on. It was a big, fast fish too. And like a high 20s, about 25 something, 26. And that's the ultimate, when you kind of go, you're not guessing. And with nymph fishing, it should even be more. With the nymph rig, you should, a dry, obviously you can see the damn thing. But nymph fishing, the better you get at it, the more you can count it down, the less waste you'll have. All you're going to do is you're going to condense your strikes into, you're going to start databasing them, and you'll stop wasting water by throwing too far above it to get to it. But in reality, when you do that, most of the time you've ruined your drift anyway, because now your line's out of control. You can't keep up with it as well.
Crosswater mending sucks.
The more you condense that,
Crosswater mending large.
Yeah,
it sucks.
You'll just stop that stuff. Sometimes you have to do it, right? There's no perfect scenario very often, but most of the time, the more you take all your data points and say, well, I got all the fish in this part of the river, and then you start positioning yourself, and instead of doing the cast, you reposition yourself, and then you make that shorter cast, which is much more accurate and much more in line, so you feel it, touch it, everything else. I tell people, in one of my nymphing videos, I tell people, and I do it all the time, I do it blindfolded. I close my eyes and to get the feel of it. And in particular, when I first started Euro nymphing and the way they're doing it now, I would just want to get the feel of things, right? And I would close my eyes and just say, should be right there and pick up. And it was amazing how often you had, without that visual, you had to have a complete feel. And I mean, I don't walk around the fucking Madison River blindfolded, obviously, but and I'm not doing it constantly. I just would try to take one sense away from myself to try to help the other one out. And, sit there and maybe do 5 casts and just not look. And then, start over with your eyes again. But it's a fine line between, you're like you said, you want to yard it because we all want to cast when we start further, right? Everything's about further. And I would say 90% of real fishing is within 20 feet of your rod tip.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
And with streamers.
Yeah, the streamer thing, I got that loud and clear because I went out and fished nothing but streamers, and it's very, I mean, to have control of anything, like especially in some of those spots where I'm at, like you're not going to yard out. I mean, you might catch a fish, it seems like reeling in or you're, pulling in or whatever, but like you're literally, I'm like, it's the equivalent of like hucking a Rapala out or Rapala for, across and then reeling it in, but that Rapala has natural movement because of the, the bill. Mm-hmm. Well, all I'm doing is yanking the fuck out of it, hoping that something bites it, right? So it's a big difference. Yeah. But, with what you were talking about on the rod side of things, they're switching over to that. Like I listened to your podcast on the rods or whatever else, but like it seems like as a whole, people are maybe over-rodded from what they need. And when I say that, like, obviously I just listen to everyone and Jeff McGowan, I think he's a rep for you, for Orvis and Scientific Angler. I think he handles your region, but when I ordered my rod, I got a 9'6" 6 weight for my streamer rod. I don't, casting a streamer out at any great distance, especially with a sinking or sink tip line, is, pretty much futile anyway. And so it seems like the same with, I'm kind of rambling on here. What are your thoughts on that? Are most people over-rodded as a whole, would you say, when they head out? Are they getting like a larger or a stiffer rod than they need?
Well, a 6 weight would never be. That's I run 6s on foot. If I'm a boat, I run 7s or seldom 8s. I get kind of elbow from those. But the big thing is you got to adapt your fly to your rod to your flies. And so if you're 3 to 5, you can handle with a 6 weight, 5 to 7s, you're just overgunned with a 6. You need to go to a 7 weight. But that's pretty much it. And I mean, but we've put a lot of emphasis on large flies in the last, it had its own life where people the musky guys came into it and the flies got pretty big. I did it for a really short window, about 10 years, 15 years ago. I was running the big stuff and then aborted it because personally don't think read the water and then you need to be able to present the fly, right? And I found it very difficult to present or to impart the action to the fly it needed, because my personal belief is the second the fly hits the water, I'll give you a stat that sounds almost impossible to believe, but a 3-inch minnow in a distressed wavelength running from something, a trout can detect 100 yards above it and 300 yards below it. When it hits that 23 to 25 hertz wavelength, that distress signal goes through the water so quickly that the fish actually knows if there's a distressed fish, it will know it instantly, right? And so when your fly hits the water, boom, down it goes. every trout within 50 feet of that knows that fly just hit. And so you need to be able to impart action to that fly and continue to do it. And make it look real, because the fish is going to zoom up. They can go, they're one of the fastest things on earth for their body sizes. They can do 30 miles an hour in half their body length, which means in a 25-foot circle, it's imperceivable to the naked eye. So they can just go, boom, they're right on your fly instantly. So it sits there like a gob of shit. That doesn't really tell them to kill it, right? It doesn't look like the best Kelly Galloup fly on earth, just sitting there floating, looks like a pile of fucking marabou. It doesn't look like a minnow, right? And so you have to first identify the size flies you're going to fish. And if you go back in time, Aron, and look, when I started this stuff with Bob and I, we didn't have articulated flies. And our biggest fly was about 4.5 inches long. And we caught thousands of big fish on them. And then suddenly you're seeing people run 9, 10 weights with these super, fishing these goddamn musky flies and pike flies. And they weren't able to move them. They weren't very successful. And so they started going back, and, people started ending up at that just traditional 4 to 5 inch dungeon style size fly. And so they, at that point, and there was I was listening to Chad Johnson the other day talking on a podcast, and he was talking to Dave Whitlock, and Dave says, yeah, I really like these big flies. He goes, and those big fish will eat them now and then. He says, but they'll eat a 3-inch sculpin always. There's a lot of truth to that. So you have to first identify, just like we don't have any problem understanding that with dry flies, that if you're going to be fishing size 16 to 20, mountain trout, 16 flies to 20 flies, obviously you're not going to take a 6-weight. You're going to take a 3 or a 4, right? And if you're fishing, 16 to 20 inch fish, and you're going to have a little bigger fly, I want to step it up to a 5 or, in there. But in streamers, they've dumbed it down for so long, they lump them all as one. And so, but it's not that way. You identify the fly you're going to fish most often, and if it's under 5 inches and you're going to run a 200 or less grain weight line, you're going to cover virtually everything. And remember, I told you, I seldom cast more than 30 feet.
Yeah.
And here's another thing, when people get worried about that, they say, that's bullshit, I throw 60. Well, first of all, your dick's not that big, you're a liar. Nobody throws fucking 60. That is an eternity, for Christ's sake. 60 feet? You can't see a fish 60 feet away. And so, but we all get this, I'm the greatest because I can cast further shit. Well, first of all, you got to understand, if you just take nothing, pull the fly to your rod tip, right? And extend your rod just like casted and stick it out. Well, it's probably 10 to 11 feet in front of you to start with, right? That's just your rod extension. So there's 10 feet. You got a 9-foot leader, so now we're up to 19 feet, or let's call it 20 to make the math easy. Well, you're 20 feet away without casting any line.
Yeah.
So now you put 20 foot of line out, you're 40 feet from the rock, from where you were standing. That's about max for me. I don't need to be 60 feet away, having no control. Because I like to say, I keep going back to this, reading the water. I look at that water. You will seldom see me fish where I throw something out there 60 feet and kind of hope that I'm going to find something the way back. I might have done that 30 years ago, but I would hope after 20 years, you have perfected some of your hunting skills that you are not going to, and wasting 1/3 of your fucking life getting to where the fucking animal is.
Yeah.
I would hope that when you're reading the goddamn water, you look out there and you say to yourself, the thing's right there in front of me. Well, why am I going to cast 30 feet past the son of a bitch? I'll tell you why, because you haven't figured out how to read your fucking water.
Yeah.
Didn't I say I was going to not say many fuck bombs?
It's all right on my podcast, so you're good. But I mean, as far as like the parallel of this, I mean, there are times again when the light pops on where I'm like, what am I doing? I know better than that. You know what I mean? Like you learn, right, or whatever. But
that's what these things are about, is learning.
Yeah, well, and the water I'm on, which you know very well, is very conducive, from what my limited experience to I mean, I can get in on things easy, right? Like there's nothing in there I can't maneuver around. Now, obviously, I'm not talking, I can't walk on water, but there are a lot of pockets to fish. And just because of physical fitness level, some people, or laziness, some people don't want to walk to. There's a lot of water to fish that you don't, again, what you were talking about. I mean, you go up and down that river and you creep it and you look in those pockets on 10 foot out from the edge. The biggest fish I've seen are there. Like they're right there where I'm like, good God, look at that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, but again, I'm learning at this, but the thing with my brain after being constantly challenged, it's good for me, because otherwise I'd probably go crazy because I was getting tired of the archery thing anyway. And it's not like I'm still not going to hunt anymore, but you kind of get to a point where I've got to work at it, right? I've got to learn. There's a lot to do, but with, and you fished this area or whatever before, but this isn't, I mean, it's piss pounded, obviously there's a ton of people that come here, but I mean, this area I'm at, that area where you are, I mean, I've had invites all over the place since I've started doing this. What are the well-known ones that, you're not going to blow out that, maybe have gone, that are way overpopulated now, but have you seen it change, I guess? Some of them, have you seen the fishing go down because of the pressure of some of the more well-known ones? Not fish numbers, but fish numbers, but also just catching.
I haven't seen numbers go down. There's not this river. Well, the Madison in particular is not a trophy river anyway. We get big fishing here on rare occasion. The 2-footers. I mean, you hear about it constantly. It's such bullshit. I mean, all my guides who are at least half my guides are better than I am. They're younger. Their reflexes are better. They can go faster, longer, everything on earth, right? And they've all been to the school of Kelly since they were 18 years old. And so at this point, they're all really good. And we have a reputation for hunting those big fish. And probably a third of our business is let's go hunt a big one. And so if we get 6, 8, 24 pluses on this river a year, that between everybody, that's pretty good. I mean, a dozen would be like, hallelujah, let's have a party. And that's a lot of guides going out every single day. It's just really hard to pop that 24 mark in this river because it's so fast. But most rivers, what I see, there's a bunch of sleeper rivers around here that just don't produce, which are great trophy rivers. The Jefferson, that is a kick your ass river. That river will kick your ass 8 times out of 10. But on the 2 times it doesn't, it's pretty fucking good. I mean, and it's a nice, slow, pussy river that gets really warm in the summer and all these things that they say kill fish, which I don't believe that heat kills fish personally. I get a lot of your people write in and tell me I'm an asshole, but we're one of the few. Most states have realized that they don't do the hoot owl anymore because fish that get dour from temperature won't eat. No matter, you drop a night crawler in the nose, they won't eat it. They just stop eating. They become much more nocturnal. But as far as what I have seen, and I noticed it back in Michigan as I was leaving, and I was listening to Alex and Chad on their podcast, or Chad's podcast the other day, and Alex Lufkus, he's a Michigan kid. He grew up with me too. Well, he's a lot younger, and he and Russ were good buddies. The kid I fished with a ton, Russ Madden. And what I did see is that I saw a lot of repetitive behavior where everybody fishes the same shit always. And it made it a lot, you didn't trick the fish like you did in the early days. And so where people pound the living piss out of every run with a streamer and they just crush it and crush it and crush every single cast, they just like pound, 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 pound. It becomes that much more imperative that you understand where that fish actually is. Because they're getting them by dumbass luck. They might be getting one through, but you should understand where that fish really should be, so you optimize it. So I don't really notice it so much in the, I mean, it may be just the fact that you don't get to make mistakes. You got to be a little bit more on your A game to make sure that you don't have your head up your ass when you do get to that one mid-river bucket. The one thing I've noticed that most streamer anglers, trophy people, only hunt banks, which is perfect. I hope they never stop that stupid behavior, because most of your big fish are on the 30 feet from the shore on the inside of a bend or a dead center of the river. You know, mid-river flats, holy shit, you know. And nobody fishes weed beds. They're always looking for the same thing. So you just need, as a trophy hunter, you need to start hunting where every jackwagon going down the river throwing his fly all day, and they're all throwing the same shit over and over and over. They're all throwing, thank God they're all throwing my flies, that way I can retire someday. But I've never seen it really. It changes the simple fish. In my mind, it changes the dumb fish that are really easy, in particular that 18 to 22 range fish that is a little more susceptible to that behavior. But I've never really seen it change too much anywhere that I've fished. I mean, I if any place it was in Michigan, but if you look at how, with the exception of 2 or 3 rivers there, those rivers are tiny. I mean, they're not very big, and they're running boats down them, and there's a hell of a lot more pressure there than there is anywhere out here, just because there's a lot more people. And the good guys still catch the big fish. The same people always catch the big fish. And you get the person that gets one by flat luck now and then, and I guess that takes one out of the equation. But overall, I don't think so. I've seen behaviors change a little bit on some rivers, and I mean, where there's a lot of pressure, and you know, they might settle down quicker, like not settle down, they might settle out, like drop out of a feeding run a little quicker when 5 people have hit them already, but they still come back and feed. They have to feed. So I don't know. It's again, I said, I don't give the trout that much credit for being smart. They're wily, I give you that, and they've always responded poorly to poor behavior. So on this river, I have no problem watching 3 guys walk through a run and give it 3 minutes and come in and fish dry flies behind them and catch fish. They might figure out that, hey, there's some dumbass, you know, rummaging around on the bank and making all kinds of noise. They just settle out for a minute. When they're done, they just move right back to their feeding lanes. And so, but when a river like the Madison, which could have 100 people on it, might take you longer to find one that they haven't tromped through. But that's about it. And I have seen no change which I thought I'd see more change in the really big fish becoming more nocturnal, even more reluctant to eat during the day, but I haven't. And I don't think, I would love to ask Russ this question to see, because Russ and I were really the pioneers. When I was writing that book, I wrote it with Bob, but all the fly and all the fly design and technique stuff was mostly Russ and I. And he was a kid, and he's a superstar, right? And we thought, I remember the first time I saw a Cougar hanging in a tree. I'm like, oh shit, it's over. And because it was so easy in the beginning. And I did see, you know, but the rivers are small, right? So we hit them every day. But I haven't seen a radical change. I wouldn't say it's radical. Maybe on super pressured rivers, it's a little harder. But at the end of this season, the trophies, the really big fish, and I didn't mention this, but movement of fish is crucial, and they move a lot. And what I've seen, the one thing I see is that people never move off of their lines. If they left jet streams, there'd be a single line down these rivers on each side, and they very seldom have they moved out to look where the fish are. And fish, big fish, trophy fish, they move pretty big distances, and they do it a lot. It's not like a migration for spawning, but big fish will move to particular types of water to feed at night. And then they almost always move upstream on the evening, it's kind of like a deer if you think about it. They move upstream in the evening to go to specific zones they fish or they hunt, and that's usually pretty shitty marginal water where the juvenile fish tend to group up at night, and they go in there to feed on the neighbor's kid and, chow one down. And then they have another migration in the morning, and that migration takes them down to their resting zones where we're going to be fishing them. And so, and I've said this 100 times, I've never seen a fish in the same spot 2 days in a row. I see them in the same, as if it's a steel line from Russ. They don't plant a mailbox out front. They go down to specific types of water, but not to that mailbox, right? So they might be other side of the river in that same soft inside, or something that's and all you're thinking about is water that doesn't make them work. It's back to that. They don't want to spend the day on the treadmill. They're going to look for stuff that makes it easy for them, and they come back to the same spots, obviously, but not very often. They tend, as a whole, they tend to come back to the same type of water, not the same spot. But it happens. There's no nevers or always. So when you figure that out, it gives the fish a lot of opportunity to be relaxed, not get pounded in the same spot by the same people every day.
Yeah. And where I'm at, that is happening a lot where I'm at. Same bug, same spot, same, you can see, like, I'm getting ready when we get off this, I'm going to take Amy out. We're going to hit Thermop and go in at the wedding. And just below that, you'll hit a bridge, and there'll be 7 boats doing a circle jerk over and over and over, round and round and round. And
daisy chaining.
Oh, dude, I tell you what, I about jerked a fucking dude from Cody. These guys, hunting, like, man, I'm pretty, like, I see somebody or I run into them, I'll talk, hey, were you hunting? Like, respect, right? Like, and I'm telling you, these guys, I'll pull a motherfucker out of a boat, like, straight into my face, 20 feet away, with clients casting at me. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? And public land, man. It's like, yeah, I can walk across this public riverbed and jerk your ass out of this boat. It's crazy here, but it's probably like that everywhere. Obviously there's different, there's etiquette or whatever, but this is the first place, and I've fished a lot. I just started fly fishing, where I've had 2 to 3 boats pull up right where I'm at on shore and just start yarding flies at me straight across. And I'm like, this is new. So I'm also trying to not make enemies on the river, but I only have so much patience. It's interesting as far as that goes.
I didn't ever, like, when I started fishing the wind, and then I took a trip, I'd never seen a person below Thermop in my life the first 10 years I was there. Yeah. I didn't know a single soul that fished the lower river, and the guy told me about it. So I went over and fished it below, 6th Street, 8th Street? Someplace down there in town, I can't remember. And I never saw a boat all day. And so I haven't experienced the shit show, because I've basically fished with Darren, or I've walked in the canyon where it's pretty hostile walking. It's not like everybody's going to stop and walk down that fucking bank. It's a bitch getting in and out of that place. And so I have fished that upper water a couple times, but from the dam down, where that 1.5 miles, whatever it is, and back then it was seldom they see 1 or 2 boats, and so and maybe a little because of our videos and stuff over there, but I haven't seen that kind of here. We have a lot of boats here, and that daisy chaining thing that started on the Bighorn proper. The guys would recircle run all day, just have the people throw out the side and row down and daisy chain back to the top. It's a tarpon term to daisy chain it, to them going back and around in the circle. I never really saw that behavior much. And here it's impossible. It's too fast.
Yeah.
You can't do it. So I haven't had to deal with it too much yet. Like I said, I'm going over to film with Darren in the end of June. I'll see it, but I'll be in the canyon again with him, so I won't see the.
You might see my fat ass on the shoreline. I'll wave like, like a Forrest Gump. Hi. Those dudes were from Casper, not Cody. I said Cody, I think, but no.
I don't get it. I don't that behavior, man. If I heard about somebody doing that, I did a thing about the fireable offenses in my store. If we have them for the guides too, man. One of them, that shit. Getting pretty old to pull guys out of their boats, but I did a lot when I was a kid. And I mean, just bad behavior is bad behavior. I don't fucking get it. I don't understand why and this river's really, really busy. And I don't know. There's just too many rats in the cage, you know?
Yeah.
And so
it is what it is. But it was interesting to me because it wasn't, I mean, I'm thinking of it as hunting and I'm like, this guy has zero fear of me, I guess, and does not give a shit. And when I say that,
always said that, but they're 50 feet away in their fucking boat. Everybody's a badass.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't like they drifted through. Like I get that, right? You got to drift by, and I'm on the bank. You got to drift. I mean, that is what it is. Or because when I drift, I got to go through here. I got no room, and nobody cares. It's all cool. We wave.
Yeah.
These guys.
You back off. You say, do you mind if I go through? If I got a guy setting up on a fish and he's dry fly fishing, I'll ask, can I get around you?
Yeah.
I got no problem stopping, giving him 5 minutes. But a little courtesy. Jesus, when I went fished in Michigan, people think it's busy around here. Go back fish the fucking Pier Marquette, which is 40 feet across. It's got 100 fucking boats on it a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I had a day on the PM once where I could not stop my boat and fishing. I went 37 to Gleason's. That's the longest, 7 miles of river. I couldn't stop. I just quit. My dad was the first guide on that river. And I told my clients, I said, we're going to go back up. We're going to do an evening float. We'll get behind them. But it's the last trip I'm ever doing here. And it was.
Yeah.
And I been guiding it longer than anybody alive. Well, not now because I left 20 years ago, but 25. But I just said it, I can't take it anymore. And no, it wasn't a rudeness. I just like, Jesus, I can't take this many people. And so part of the reason I moved to Montana. And then I moved to the busiest river in Montana.
On that note, just because I probably should wrap this up. I've had you on for almost 2 hours.
Your friend's going to leave you.
And I'd keep talking to you, but I got to hit the river with Amy. But where can people find you? Like give them all the YouTube and Instagram and the podcast, all that shit.
Look up Kelly Galloup anywhere, it'll pop up. I don't even know the names of our, like, if it is Kelly, if there's slide in or Kelly Galloup, that'll take you to all our stuff.
Cool.
It'll instantly, because there's podcasts, there's YouTubes, there's Instagram stuff, and guys post stuff all the time up. But anybody that wants to get a hold of me, just look up anyway. It'll show up somewhere.
Well, cool. Well, as my
I probably should have an official look it up at www.slidein.com or something. But I'll say that, and the boys will go, Jesus, we got rid of that 10 years ago, you dinosaur.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's funny. Well, go ahead.
I've been relinquished to basically kissing babies and shaking hands. As Chris, my shipping manager, came to me one day, these guys are shipping all day, every day, and I go and try to help, and Chris pulls me aside. He says, boss, we really appreciate it when you help, but damn, it sure goes a lot better if you don't. I said, have I been obsoleted? And he says, maybe a little. I said, oh, shit, success, 45 years. I've gotten the job I've been waiting for.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's funny as hell. Well, as this kind of journey goes on for me, dude, if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't hurt my feelings to get you back on the podcast and shoot the shit at some point. And I may head up there and do a guided trip with you guys. At some point, probably when the weather is worse and people are less, and I'd go off your guidance on that one. So,
yeah, that's late season.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, we'll keep in touch. I'll be down that way. Maybe I'll hook up and
Yeah,
We'll be
yeah.
down filming down there.
You'll drive by the house. You'll see the one with 30 3D targets in the front yard. That's my house. You can't miss it. So,
I kind of assumed as much.
Two
Well,
giant
cool. That's what this has been. Yeah, it's been
dogs.
fun.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. I appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do. Like, it's been a huge help for me. And in fact, we're somewhat like-minded and talk a lot of shit as an added bonus. So if you were like a fucking dork, it'd be hard to have a podcast with you. But this one went really well. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
All right, buddy. Take it easy.
All right. See ya.